buckle up, because today we're going deep into the world of the Mafia.
The world, yeah, where loyalty and betrayal go hand in hand.
Exactly. And our guide for this journey, Dominick Cicale's Mafia Roundtable podcast.
You know, it's not your typical history book rehash.
Not even close, right?
I mean, Dominick himself has serious ties to the mob.
Yeah, he does.
And he brings on these guests who've lived and breathed this life.
So we're not just getting like the textbook version of the Mafia, we're getting the inside scoop.
Exactly, first-hand accounts.
So for all our listeners out there who want to become Mafia experts fast, this deep dive's for you.
Oh yeah, you're going to learn about the culture,
The history,
the big players.
and some seriously crazy stories.
Oh, for sure.
And we'll get to all that. But first, a little background on the podcast itself.
Okay, so picture this. Mafia Roundtable, it's like pulling up a chair to a table full of wise guys.
I like it.
Dominick's the host, right? And he's talking to these former mobsters, associates, even law enforcement.
And they're spilling all the tea.
Oh yeah, they're sharing stories you won't find anywhere else.
Like, for example.
Well, they talk about guys like Joe Massino,
Oh, yeah, Massino, huge name.
the first boss of the five families to flip and become an informant.
Or a rat.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just scratching the surface.
Speaking of just scratching the surface, what about that baseball bat incident? I gotta say, that episode left me kind of speechless.
Oh, yeah, that one's brutal. I mean, they describe it in detail, no punches pulled.
Talk about a chilling example of how they enforce their rules.
It really makes you think, right? Like, this isn't Hollywood. This is real life.
Real life with real consequences.
And that's what makes Mafia Roundtable so different.
It's not romanticizing the mob, it's showing it for what it is.
Raw and unfiltered.
So, okay, we've got violence, we've got betrayal, but what about this whole honor among thieves thing? I mean, how does that actually work in practice?
Well, you hear about these situations where a made guy,
Made guy. Just for anyone listening who's not familiar, that's a fully initiated member of the Mafia.
right, so a made guy is torn between protecting his family and keeping his mouth shut.
Omerta, the code of silence.
Exactly, omerta. And sometimes it's not so black and white.
So it's not always about blind loyalty.
No, not always. The podcast really highlights the pressure these guys were under.
To choose between the Mafia and their loved ones.
Right, and the decisions they made had huge consequences.
Sometimes life or death.
And that whole idea of betrayal, well, the podcast spends a lot of time on the role of informants.
Rats, as they're called in the mob world.
Yeah, rats. You know, these are people who, for whatever reason, decide to cooperate with the feds.
Putting a target on their own backs.
And their families' backs.
Mafia Roundtable really digs into what would drive someone to do that.
What breaks that code of silence?
The psychology behind it is fascinating, right?
Totally. It shows the constant tug of war between loyalty and survival.
So, okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. Why should our listeners care about this?
Well, I think it humanizes the mafia. It takes it beyond the stereotypes and the Hollywood portrayals.
And it shows the real impact of organized crime.
Not just on the mobsters themselves.
On everyone around them.
Families, communities.
And society as a whole.
I mean, Mafia Roundtable challenges us to rethink what we think we know about this hidden world.
It really is an eye-opener. So if you're looking for something that's gripping and thought-provoking,
And dives deep into the realities of mafia life.
check out Mafia Roundtable. You won't regret it.
But before you do,
Here's something to ponder.
the podcast, it paints this picture of a world where personal relationships and loyalties constantly clash with the mafia's strict code of conduct.
Yeah, it's like a pressure cooker of loyalty and betrayal,
So the question is, can true loyalty even exist in that kind of environment?
where betrayal seems almost inevitable.
Something to think about.
Until next time, keep diving.
Keep diving.